Okay, let's get started. So good evening, welcome. My name is Laura Brower-Haygood, and I am the Executive Director of the DC History Center. And we are just absolutely delighted to present tonight's program, Our Latinidad, Our Blackness, with Carmen Torruella-Quander, Ana Ndumu, Angeley Crawford Gibb, and moderator, Señorita Rosalyn Lake-Montero. This program is part of our ongoing Context for Today series of conversations that examine the roots of today's most urgent issues and focus on issues of equity and justice. So thank you for joining us. For those of you who are not familiar with us already, the DC History Center is a nonprofit, community-supported educational and research organization, and we were founded in 1894. Our mission is to deepen understanding of our city's past, to connect, empower, and inspire. And we do this work through research and scholarship, youth education, amazing adult programs like this one, and exhibits. We are located in the historic Carnegie Library at Mount Vernon Square. In fact, this evening I'm in the Kiplinger Research Library on the second floor. And our exhibits and shop are now open to the public Thursday through Sunday, and that's as of this upcoming weekend. So we're delighted about that. You'll find us online at dchistory.org and on social media. So our program tonight is co-produced with Manuel Mendez, who is chair of the AfroLatino Caucus and also one of the DC History Center's community council members. Our community council, which we convened for the first time this summer, is comprised of leaders from each of DC's 8 wards. It serves as a forum for open dialogue about how the DC History Center can use the tools of history to benefit the lives of Washington residents in all corners of the city. At the DC History Center, we often examine the role of the past in shaping the present and the future. And so in that spirit, let's pause to recognize that we stand on the ancestral lands of the Necochunk or Anacostan people and the Piscataway people and reflect on what the legacies of colonialism mean to us today. We honor over a dozen tribal nations living across the region along the Anacostia and Potomac watersheds, the Chesapeake Bay area, and on the land today considered part of Virginia and Maryland. So this evening, we will hear from 4 absolutely remarkable women who will share their personal experiences in the context of DC's Latinx communities and their histories. Their conversation will prompt us to reflect on timely issues such as language, identity, immigration, and representation. This program continues our work with DC's Latinx communities, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with this work, which is relatively new to us, we want to give you some background and share our next steps. So last spring, we collaborated with Mariana Barastidas, a student at UDC, to create the guide to selected research materials relating to Latino X communities in Washington, DC, which is available in a PDF format. Building on this excellent work this fall semester, UDC student Kelsey Aguilar has turned this information into an online guide with a shorter title, Researching Latino X DC. LitGuides are a content management and information sharing system designed specifically for libraries. This platform allows for easy navigation among a wide range of different resources. And the link to our new LibGuide is in the chat if you want to check that out. Both of these tools are designed to assist researchers in looking for records and collections that reflect DC's vibrant and diverse Latinx communities. And we hope that this resource will encourage new research and scholarship in this area and amplify the stories of DC's Latinx communities. In fact, we are already hearing positive feedback from folks using these guides, and they're telling us that it's helping them find resources much more quickly, which was exactly the idea. As Mariana and the DC History Center team worked on the archival resource guide this last year, we also found that most of the materials that relate to Washington's Latinx communities are not held in traditional repositories like the DC History Center or even the People's Archive at the DC Public Library. So this fall, Mariana is returning to us as our first community outreach fellow. She will lead conversations about the lack of Latinx representation in historical archives and identify next steps for addressing this gap. Advised by a community working group, she will also design and implement a public program with the DC History Center next spring. So we're very excited about that, and we look forward to sharing more details in the coming months as that takes shape. So after this program, you will receive our usual survey. And for those of you who are members of the Latinx communities, please do use this as an opportunity to suggest ideas to Mariana for her outreach initiative. So thank you, Mariana and Kelsey. I hope you're both listening, for your outstanding work. It is truly a joy to have you with us. But now I want to focus on our speakers and the joy that they bring us with being with us tonight. And so I welcome our co-producer, Manuel Mendez, to say a few words about developing this program and to introducing this wonderful panel of wonderful ladies.
Thank you so much, Laura, for that. First, I want to thank the DC History Center staff for helping us organize and plan this event, in particular, Mariana Orchard. Thank you for your guidance and input in ensuring we could provide the best panel discussion. I want to thank the panelists for their willingness to help and give us constructive feedback. La Doctora Ana, Angeley Crawford, Rosalyn Lake-Montero, and Carmen Torruella-Quander for your wisdom. I'm truly indebted for sure. When asked to collaborate on a program, I automatically wanted to organize it around Black Latina experience in the DMV. As our community deals with Black erasure, structural racism, and white supremacy tendencies, now more than ever, we want or we need to bring more visibility to the historical and contemporary contributions of Black Latinas in our community. For me, Black women are our blueprint to follow, and so it's my pleasure to introduce the Our Latinidad, Our Blackness moderator, Rosalyn Lake-Montero.
Hi all, my name is Rosalyn Lake-Montero. I go by Señorita Lake. Very pleased to be sharing this space with our amazing panelists. I want to thank Manuel Mendez and DC History for holding spaces like this for us Black women to just leave our prints, our history print in DC History and to revisit it. So I'm going to go ahead and allow the other panelists to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with la señora Carmen. Si puede dar unas cuantas palabras de usted, a few words about yourself.
In English, my name is Carmen Torruella. I'm a professional representational artist. I was born here in Washington in 1945 because my mother never expected to stay here. I was claimed Dominican and I had to go through the process. But most of my life I've lived in Washington, but I studied art in New York. And I'm so happy to be with you, with all you young people. And I want to thank my daughter for helping me. I'm hard of hearing, so she's my little panita today. Thank you so much.
Perfect. It's a pleasure to have Carmen. Next, I will go to Ana, so she can share a little bit about herself.
Buenas noches a todos. It's a pleasure to be here. Es un placer. And I am an assistant professor at the University of Maryland. I was born in Nicaragua, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And I've been living in the DC metro area for the past 3 years. Thank you.
Beautiful. And last but not least, the lovely Angeley Crawford. If you could share a little bit about yourself, my love.
Hi, my name is Angeley Crawford Gibb, and that's a recent change. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I have been in the DMV area for 7 years now. I recently added my mother's last name to my name as a way to continue honoring her in every space that I am in, publicly and professionally. I am an educator. I'm an educator in the DMV area. I teach high school students to Spanish, as well as courses on the Afro-Latin diaspora. And I am of Afro-Costa Rican descent, limonense, donde quiera que voy, limonense soy. And the best way that I can describe myself is I am your favorite fat, because fat is political. I'm your favorite fat, hot gal, tia in training.
Beautiful. I love Angeley's energy. I didn't share a lot about me because I want to flow into it. I'm an educator like Angeley as well. And it's such a pleasure to share this space with lovely, strong Black women who are living such prints in DC history and are representing us so well. So we're gonna go ahead and move into our questions. We could go in the same order that we just introduced ourselves. So we could start with Carmen, Anna, and then Angeley. And just so the audience knows, we are women and we're just gonna flow in conversation now. So if you guys wanna stay off mute, if you wanna add something to what the next person shares, feel free to do that. We are in a safe space with safe people and people that wanna encourage us to share our stories. The first questions that I like to ask, this is for all the panelists. If you could use a phrase to describe the intersection of being a Black woman, immigrant, and Spanish speaking in DC, what phrase would you use and why?
Unfortunately, confusion.
Okay.
Not on my part. I've always known what I am, but people cannot get it through their minds that we exist. Not only here, but in my own profession. It's been not difficult, because when you know what you are, you don't have a problem. The problem is with the other person, but it's confusion, and it's part of the educational system of this country. We all learned. I'm 76 years old, and we all learned everything there was to learn about Europe. We learned nothing about Latin America. We learned nothing about Africa. We learned nothing about anyone else. And so my young life in Washington, I was claimed to be other because they didn't know what to do with us, you know. So it's a simple confusion.
Thank you. Thank you. We could go ahead to Anna. Anna, are you good with the question?
Yeah, and I would say for me, it's unapologetically Black. There's a phrase now that we use on our hashtags, orgullosamente afrodescendiente, where we acknowledge our Blackness first and our Latinidad as equal but secondary. And I think that for me, people see my Blackness first, and especially since I am now married and my spouse happens to be Ugandan, so people make a lot of assumptions about me before they know that I'm a Latina. And so I think for me, it's hybrid, and just like Doña Carmen said, I think people make presumptions and they underestimate. I remember growing up, and I grew up in Miami, and just going into stores and people, just the cashiers, one instance said, "Ay, que jode," you know, and she didn't know that we spoke Spanish, and my mom had to correct her and check her. And I think oftentimes we're invisible, we're underestimated, and I think I am extremely proud now that we are showing up and that we are bold about the fact that we cross boundaries, and that we can't be boxed, as Doña Carmen said. So for me, it would be unapologetically Black. I'm Black first. I feel like I meander through ethnicities because of, you know, my family's from the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua, and then I'm married to an African. My first language is Spanish. So I feel like, you know, Blackness is my salient identity.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Angeley, what phrase would you use, my love?
I absolutely love that I'm getting to go after both of these amazing women, because I feel like what I'm about to share ties it all together. And to echo what Anna said, I do not identify. I use Afro-Latina, Latine, Latinx as a point of reference, but I stand flat-footed, 10 toes down in negra, because I am Black in every language that I speak. Whether I am speaking in Limonense Creole, whether I am speaking in Brooklyn, whether I'm speaking in English or Spanish, negra, Black is what I have always been. And so for me, when I think of a phrase, I go to two poets that have been monumental in my life. Shirley Campbell Barr, who is Afro-Costa Rican. I discovered her when I was 19. And my point is salient about talking about discovering her at 19, because as Doña Carmen says, I did not have access. I did not understand. I did not know. I could not comprehend why we were the way that we were. And so finding Shirley Campbell Barr led me to Eulalia Barnard, who is one of our foremost poets in the vein of Louise K. Bennett, and she recently passed on, transitioned to becoming an ancestor. And these two women have shaped the way that I have understand my identity as an Afro-Costa Rican who is U.S. based. And so, is it okay if I share a little bit of their work? So when I think about Shirley Campbell Barr, and I will read it in both English and Spanish, because this is Shirley Campbell Barr is very adamant about her work being shared in the original language as well as the translated language. And the reason for that is because things do get lost in translation, and we need to recognize and honor the sentiments in the ways that they were said. But this is one of my favorite poems. And I stand flat-footed in this piece because it has become popularized over the last decade in very specific ways, to the point where even non-Black Latinos have used it. And in some respects that feels as though, like, stop taking our stuff. But this is called Rotundamente Negra. And when I think of a phrase that grounds me for what it means to live at these intersections, this portion of the poem and another that I will share from Eulalia are the ones that are most significant to me. Me niego categóricamente a dejar de hablar mi lengua, mi acento y mi historia. Y me niego absolutamente a ser parte de los que callan, de los que temen, de los que yo, porque me acepto, rotundamente libre, rotundamente negra, rotundamente hermosa. I categorically refuse to desist from speaking my language, in my accent, and of my history. And I absolutely refuse to be part of those who keep silent, of those who fear, of those who weep, because I accept myself unequivocally free, unequivocally Black, and unequivocally beautiful. Rotundamente negra. And from Eulalia Barnard, who, yeah, if you don't know who Eulalia Barnard is, you need to look her up. I will drop her name in the link, but her work, oh, excellent. But she says, I carry on my feet the long walks of bygone days. I carry in my eyes the torrent of your waters. Now, yes, for I am yours, Limon, and like you, I run to the sea, and I am renewed. Both pieces ground me in my Blackness, but also ground me specifically in the province where my family is from. And that is significant because prior to 1948, Afro descendants were not allowed to live in the province of Limon. I look at this poem, Eulalia says, now that I am yours, now that I belong to you, I will stand flat-footed in that knowledge, and I will now make myself an imprint of this country so that you will not forget me. And so when I think about that, the intersections of my identity as a Black Latin American woman, that is what you will not forget me. I will not deny my heritage. I will not stop speaking my accent. And I defy you to tell me who you think I should be.
Thank you so much, Angeley, and everybody that share. I'm gonna share a little bit of how I feel when I hear those words. As I'm a first generation immigrant, I'm Black, I'm a woman, I'm an educator. And when I hear, in my experience in DC and in San Pedro de Macorís, where I'm originally from, I always think about the phrase "Soy el desarrollo en carne viva" by Calle 13. And that basically means I am development in living flesh. I love Carmen because when she was saying the confused part, it's funny because I've always known what I am. It's always been other people that are like, oh, I don't know what you are. You got to be in this box. In the DR, I don't know the system of how you're supposed to identify yourself. But like my parents always make sure that I knew I was a beautiful, morena, bella, you know, I just had to excel in school and in every space and place that I was in, that I was basically breaking the generational curses that they were trying to break. So that's mine. And that's from Calle 13. Soy el desarrollo en carne viva. We'll move. And I love Shirley Campbell, like Rotundamente Negra. That gave me so much as a young lady in college. It really helped me embrace who I was. So I'm very happy that you shared that, Miss Angeley. Vamos a la siguiente pregunta. We could go to the next questions. What is your family's origin? I know Anna shared that her family is from Nicaragua. And how did you end up coming to DC? Like, what is your immigrant experience, right? Because some of us are not born in other countries. Some of us are Americanos, American, like Angeley. But I'm playing with you, inside joke. But some of us we're immigrants, or we are tied into the immigrant experience. So being that the panel is about DC history, so what is your tie to DC? How did you come to DC, and what is your family's origin? Like, for example, I'm Cocola from San Pedro de Macorís. I came to DC to become a diplomat. I fell in love with education, and I want to leave my footprint in the DC educational system in the world to further develop our young boys and our young girls from underdeveloped communities. So I would like to know from our panelists, what is your family's origin, and how did you end up in DC, and your imprint? So we can all come off mute, and we could, like, we're having a cafecito, we could just talk.
Yeah, so I'll this is a very poignant question, because it'll explain just how Black people, our people, the diaspora, has been on the move. So I'll share this story really through pictures. So my family and I migrated here in the 1980s. And so the picture on the left is me. A few months after we came here, I still only spoke Spanish. So my siblings and I identify as Bluefielders, which is on the Atlantic coast, is a very Caribbean, very vibrant multicultural community with indigenous groups such as the Mosquitos and the Samas and the Rumos. And so I know that I am multicultural just by way of my family, but my mom and dad lived on the Pacific coast. So that's why we only knew Spanish when we arrived in the US, because the Pacific coast of Nicaragua is very mestizo. So we were really spending our formative years, our early years, in a very mestizo society where we didn't recognize our Blackness. And then we migrated to Miami after the Sandinista War, just before the Contra War in the 1980s. So when I tell people that I too was a Central American asylee, there's always questions. And so you have to wonder who can claim that designation. And also we see a lot of presumptions, a lot of stereotypes, and even racism toward Black Central American migrants and asylees now. And I experienced that because people don't readily believe me when I say that I was a Central American asylee. And Juliet Hooker, she's a professor at Brown, Juliet rather, she talks about why can't Blacks be believed when they say they are Nicaraguan? There's always like qualifying or questioning. So on the right is a few years later in elementary school, poetry is where I really found myself in learning English through reading, through libraries. I later became a librarian. So my elementary school years were very, very defining, because I had to kind of choose. And for all Black immigrants, really, we're subsumed. Our stories are often subsumed within the African-American story. And so, which is a rich story, and we can draw from it, especially the legacy of civil rights, but it wasn't entirely my story. So I learned how to code switch. I learned how to suppress my Spanish accent. And then the next slide shows a deep part of our history on the Atlantic coast, and my parents really experienced this more than we did, but that was colonialism and the remnants of imperialism. And these are missionaries, Moravian missionaries who came to the Atlantic coast. So the Moravian church is not that I'm glorifying it or aggrandizing it, it's just that I just want to tell the story through the Moravian church. It's a stronghold within Bluefields. The denomination is really powerful. And so in the next slide, you'll see the original building, and it still has kept that same frame. It's 174 years old. The Moravian missionaries came to the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua in 1847. And so I suppose the culture was changed as a result of that. The indigenous cultures were imperialized and colonized, and so were the Creoles, were known as Creoles. But then we made this our own, and this is to demonstrate the power and just the vibrance of Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Latin history. We also, at this time in the early 20th century and late 18th century, see a lot of Antillean migration, Jamaicans, Barbadians, and moving to help with the Panama Canal, Bahamians moving all over. And this is how a lot of people came to Nicaragua, which was then imperialized by the US military and later the British military. So the Moravian church and different powers, white colonial powers, have had such an influence on the Atlantic coast, and still Bluefielders have persisted. So in the next slide, I show really a bedrock of my upbringing in Miami, which was Prince of Peace Moravian Church, an Afro-Nicaraguan church. And I learned so much about our culture, the star at the bottom. And actually that church is here in the DMV. There's a diaspora in Miami. There's an enclave here as well. There's one in New York, and we're all connected. Before I even moved up here, I had an aunt up here who had been living in the DMV for more than 30 years. So we have pockets of communities, and Nicaragua is very small to begin with. It's only 6 million people, and of that, 9% is Afro-Nicaraguan. So we're only 540 people. And so those who migrated to the US, we are so closely knit. Our softball tournaments, our Moravian faith, it really binds us. So Faith Moravian Church is in Northwest DC. It's right by Tacoma Park area. And I was very, very pleased when I moved up here to know that there is a Moravian church, number one, and an Afro-Nicaraguan diaspora that I could cling to. And at the bottom right, you see my family, and this is their first trip after I moved here. My daughter's on the right, my mom and my dad, my aunts. You can see one of my aunts is partly Miskito, and so she's indigenous. That's my mom's half sister. And so you also have the ambassador to the US from Nicaragua, Francisco Campbell, which my parents grew up with. And so it was a very real treat for them. So the moral of the story is that Afro-Nicaraguans have come here and thrived and persisted. And despite the influences, they have a rich, and we have a rich and vibrant culture. We're very proud. And Nicaragua right now is in a flux, as is a lot of Central American countries. And so I am incredibly proud of our people, our culture, how we have made it our own despite outside influences. And so really that is how I migrated here and how I identify.
Thank you so much for sharing. Your pictures were beautiful. Thank you so much. That's a beautiful image. Carmen or Angeley, either or?
Dona Carmen, is it if I go next and you go after? Because I feel like you have the deep DC history.
Right.
Okay.
Wait, no, it's not your turn.
What?
She was saying if it's okay that she goes next.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's good.
Um, So my narrative of arriving to the DMV or to the DC area really starts with language, and that is poignant to me for several different reasons. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York. I am not from the DMV area, and I moved here to become a heritage Spanish teacher, and that was pretty poignant because similar to what Anna said. Even though Spanish and Limonense Creole were always the entry points of language for me, um, and they were spoken in my home primarily, much of my identity was subsumed by Afro West Indians or Afro Caribbeans because I was in New York City. And so the side of me that spoke Spanish, right, very quickly went under, and the side of me that spoke Limonense Creole came forward. And you will often hear me jump back and forth between both quite comfortably. And to be frank, I am most comfortable in Limonense Creole, if I'm going to be honest. Um, but moving to the DMV to become a Spanish teacher was a decision that I made professionally, personally, but more importantly, politically. And I made that decision because the DMV is Central American heavy, but it is not necessarily Afro Central American or Afro Costa Rican heavy. And so it was important for me that my students, that when I walked into the classroom, my students met me not only as an Afro Latina person, but also as an Afro Central American. Because what I have when we talk about space, place, and region in terms of Afro Latin identity in the US, it is interesting to analyze it here within the DMV. And many of my students who identify as Afro Dominican, who identify as Dominican, identify as Afro Dominican within this context, especially because here, if you are Black and you are Latin American, right, because of the high Central American population, you must be Dominican. That is the assumption. And so being a heritage Spanish teacher, while it has been beautiful, has also been extremely difficult. And so what specifically brought me to the DMV was becoming a language teacher. I say that when I talk about an immigrant story, the next story I talk about at length is my mother's, because while I was born here in the U.S., my mother was not. And Madam, if you could show the pictures, I'd love that. This is Joyce Claire Gibb. And if you could show, I think I showed you sent you some more with my mother and yes. This is my mother and I in Brooklyn, New York, and then in Baltimore. And this is significant because my mother came to the United States in the 70s. She was a nurse practitioner in Costa Rica. That is significant because my mother was of the generation that did not just have the opportunity to go to school, but started off as CNAs, worked and then worked their way into being nurses in Costa Rica. And when my family talks about her history as a nurse, they talk about it with such pride and such joy, and it is significant because again, my mother was born in 1948, and in 19 she was the year that she was born was the first year that Afro Costa Rica, that Limonense Afro Caribbeans in Limon could leave and enter the rest of the country. Understand, they came to build the railroad and they came to pick plantain and they built up the country, but prior to 1948 could not leave that space. My mom came to the United States of America. She took the test to be a nurse several times. She was able to pass it up until the LPN, but was not able to achieve the RN. And for my mother, who was a nurse practitioner in her own country, that was a hard pill to swallow. And part of that reason was language, right? Taking the test, anxiety, and taking the test in English was very different for her from taking it in Spanish. And so when I talk about specifically language and migration, you can go back to the one with just my mom. I think about, Marin, if you could go back to the picture with just my mom. When I think about language and migration, I think about and identity development, I think about how language deeply affected my mother and how in many respects made it made her immigration story difficult. And I have been living with that. She is now gone. And I have been living with that. Part of my response to that, though, is in the ironies of ironies, her daughter, who was born in the United States, took up the language that she carried and decided to move to another place and teach from that place. And so this throughway of language and identity is what brings me to the DMV. This throughway of language and understanding Black identity in all languages is what keeps me here. And this space, my mother was a nurse and she was a healer. In this space, as an educator, I also function as a healer. Oftentimes with my students in the heritage classroom, helping them navigate these very difficult spaces of identity, Latinidad, and it's particularly for my students who are Afro-Latine, having that physical representation of a dark skinned Black Central American teaching them Spanish is so significant and necessary. And so when I think about that and I think about what that presence means for me and what the mark means for me in terms of the DMV, it is to make sure that Afro Latine people are represented, but specifically to make sure that Afro Central Americans are also taken in part of the conversation as well. Because we are here and we've always been here. There are over 150 million Afro descendants in the world. We are here and our stories need to be told. And the thing that I always land on in terms of identity and migration stories is that we are all speaking languages of the oppressor. So if you do not speak Spanish well and you are Afro-Latino, it's okay, baby. It's fine. Nobody is mad. Señorita Lake, Señorita Gibb, we will help you. Doña Carmen will help you. I'm sure Anna will help you. Manuel will help you. It's fine, baby. It does not make you any less who you are. And I want to say that. I say that in as many public spaces as I can. Your Afro-Latine identity is not tied to your ability to speak Spanish well. That is just not the case. It doesn't make you any less who you say you are. But when all is said and done, excuse my language, fuck that. Be you. Be happy. Be proud of your identity as a Latin American person. No one can take that from you. Whether you are US based, like me, or not. That's my little story.
I love your stories, Angeley. And your mom is beautiful. Her soul is beautiful.
Ain't she though? Just good looking woman, pretty.
Kids, don't play with her. Vamos con la señora Carmen.
Okay. My experience is totally different from everyone's. My mom came here to work for the Dominican Embassy as a seamstress in 1940. And my dad came here to finish studies at American University. And my youngest brother and I were born here in Washington. Back then, like I said before, we were other. So there was no Black or white so much as other because we were Latin American and we didn't speak English, none of us. One of the first encounters we came was my oldest brother was at Cardoza High School. And my mother was told that he had to move from Cardoza to McFarland, which was farther away from our house. We were on 11th and Euclid, and Cardoza is at 11th and Fairmont, I think the name of the street is. My mother couldn't understand why, because the Blacks are coming. So that was an oxymoronic for my poor mom. She didn't understand English, and then she didn't understand that, why Raul had to go so far away. Believe it or not, my husband had to explain that to me because we just didn't understand, and Raul didn't understand either. So because they were integrating the schools and they left Cardoza for the African American, Negro, or colored at that time. And then Raul, who by American standards was a white boy, he had to go to McFarland and then Roosevelt. Okay, my mother didn't understand, but she just knew that Raul was going too far away. That was our first experience. And when that happened, Raul was 10 years older than I. So I don't remember, but I was about maybe 3 or 4 years old. So then our experience, Humberto and I, are the same. We started Sacred Heart in 1950. My brother, another Dominican American, father African American, mother Dominican, from the East, and my husband. The two of them spoke English, my brother and I did not. And we started at Sacred Heart, I said 1950s. My brother Raúl, Ramberto, myself, my sister Miriam, and my parents, Juan Torruella, Juana Campos. Okay, so my mother knew, the embassy helped her because she didn't know where to put us in school, so she put us there. And my husband tells me that the reason was because, and we figured it out, we were safe. And they couldn't really say anything to us because they probably thought they were going to cause an international incident. The ambassador of that time was Andres Pastoriza. And he found out about the racism. This is a white Dominican. He found out about the racism because his staff was mixed and he would take them all to church. And then they couldn't. So he started taking his staff, white and black, to St. Augustine because that was a black church. And which was very interesting to me. In the name of God, this was happening. So my brother and I went through the motions. My brother had a more difficult time than I did, I think, because he understood English quicker than I did. It took me a long time. But I knew I was different. 9 to 3, everything was different. I was very quiet. I was very studious. But I knew that I wasn't in a place that I was comfortable with. But that's where my mother put me, and I was always very obedient. So we went through the motions. And every time, I think I said this before, every time a Latin American came in and didn't speak English, I was assigned to that person to help them. Because by the time of 3rd grade, I was actually speaking like I'm speaking now. So that was my situation, but I didn't realize my brother was allowed to be an altar boy. And you can see Humberto, he's brown like me. But my husband, who could be his twin at that time, they were very similar, he was not allowed. And Ricardo Washington, who is a black, he was not allowed. I didn't know that. You know, so in the Catholic Church. So we grew up and, oh, there's Ricardo behind me. That's me. We're talking to some priests. Ricardo's behind me. My brother's next to him. And a Dominican woman, Dolores Hernandez, is behind me, behind Richard. And my brother and I, we are just 14 months apart. And he was, and still is, something else. But anyway, that's another story. So we went through school. Now, the African Americans started coming into Sacred Heart maybe when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. I don't remember because I didn't have any in my class. My husband did. And I didn't realize that there were parties going on. The African American children were giving parties, and the white children were giving a party. I was invited to none of them. But it didn't bother me, I guess. But I didn't know much because I had my own Latin community and we were all together. So after school, the weekends, and even when I was older, I had my dances with my people. And it's interesting how both of you were talking about fitting. It doesn't, no cabe en la cabeza del americano that we exist. It just doesn't fit. After I finished school and I came back home, I had a secretary who just could not deal with the fact that her boss was a black woman. And she kept saying, well, Carmen, you're not really black. And I was like, I'm not African American. No, you're right on that point. But what am I? Tell me, because you seem to know what I'm not. And that has been my situation all of my life. And this country has got, I believe in karma, but this country has got to pay for its sins in that sense, putting us like we're some sort of, I don't know. My field is the arts. The oldest painting in the Western Hemisphere is of 3 Black men coming from Ecuador, dressed in all kinds of gold finery and beautiful gowns. They were Ecuadorian, but their gowns are based on Africa, somewhere in the western part of Africa. My experience, I'm Dominican, and I believe my people are some of the racist people on earth. There's no question. My mother, when my husband had been to Africa twice, and he says, Carmen, I need for you to go. I'm meeting my ancestral family. And I said, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going. He said, no, you're going. And my mother gave me a rosary. And of course, I prayed all the way over. When we get to the airport, it was the same confusion you see in Santo Domingo. The exact same. The only difference was they were speaking another language. They were trying to take my stuff. And then when we got to this place called Kumasi, we're going over the bridge into the city of Kumasi, and I see Campos, one of the largest factories they have there. Y mi apellido es Campo, mi apellido americano es Campo. And I was like, oh my gosh, my mother's gonna have a cow. You know, but I said, we are from here. Well, the culture in Ghana, my husband's people are Fanti. The culture, the food, it's all from West Africa. And like my husband always says, yeah, your mother's always talking about Spain, but mofongo, mango, he said, those are all really Spanish things. I said, you know what? You've opened my eyes. It never dawned on me. I said, you're right. And I've been now to the east, the west coast of the southern part of Africa. And there's always something that I can connect with. Now, coming back from my first trip, I went to apply at the Museum of African Art. I didn't know anything about African art, but I was going to learn. And one of the things I said is, you are never going to get another one like me here, because no Dominican of my skin color would come here. But I need for my people that come here, the students, to see me. Now, this is one thing that I have always been aware of without knowing that it was important. Wherever I step foot and I am declared the first, either Spanish speaking or African, Latino, AfroLatino, or whatever you want to call me, I know that I have something to leave for those behind me. I've always been conscious of that. My work-study program ended up being where I worked after I finished school, which was a museum of the city of New York. I was the first native Spanish speaker and the first person of color. No pressure for me, because I was the first at Sacred Heart, no big deal. And the illusion on many of the Latin Americans that come here is that these gringos know everything, and they don't, you know? And we have to know a little more. And the best thing I did was marry a man that could help me through this. Because he's always, whoa, you're not really American. He said, yeah, my family's been here since the 1600s. His mother isn't, but his father was. I was the first there. I was the first Latin American at African Art. I was the first Black person at Hillwood Museum, which is the equivalent to the Russian Museum here. I was the first student at the Repin Institute in St. Petersburg, Russia, and you have to be invited to go there. The first one of color and with a Caribbean background. So I know my responsibility. We as people of color, me of my age, you are more fortunate because people like me went before you. And I don't kiss anyone, if you know what I'm saying. But I know who I am. I have raised children that know who they are. And that is important. My son has been asked more than once. He has almond's eyes, and he's always been asked, "What are you?" And he says, "I'm a cute little guy my mother made." You know, I mean, this country has got to stop and realize that the world is not black and white, just American. They've got to realize that blacks were coming to this country before Columbus, who never set foot here. They've got to realize that they were here before. They've got to realize that in every single Latin American country, there is a Black community, and they didn't just get there. And with that, I will stop. Okay? Thank you.
No, beautiful. Muchísimas gracias, Carmen. That was so insightful. My history, how I came to DC. I came to DC for grad school to be in a Spanish master's program, but because of language, which is so interesting that Angeley was sharing that, I didn't feel comfortable in my program. I didn't feel comfortable enough because my grad school professors were not Afro-Latinos, right? But like whenever I would speak Spanish in class, I wish I had a teacher like Angeley or like a mentor like Manny that would reassure me to know that like, no, you speak, your Spanish is fine. It's a diversity. It's a linguistic diversity. I learned that from one of the only professors that I actually really truly connected with in that school, which was Professor Lehman. And she taught a class about language, like linguistics. And I think Angeley shared it, or I think it was one of the queens that are on this board or on this panel. When you think about Black folks, like Carmen just said, we are global. We are the sons and daughters of the diaspora. Therefore, we come in every nationality, right? We've been everywhere. The system of education, as we know it, actually started in Africa. I learned that from my girl, Johanna. And when I came to DC, I didn't know that I was coming to DC to feel so empowered, to feel so welcome, embraced, and celebrated for who I was. Because my dad had to move us from New York to the countryside where there were Dominican people, there were Afro-descendant people, but there were not the representation of who I wanted to become in the professional world, right? So when I came to DC and I heard about the DC AfroLatino Caucus, it was like, what? That's a thing? So that gave me so much empowerment to connect somebody asked the question in the chat, and I want to tie what I'm saying into that because it was anonymous, but they said, and you ladies can come off mute, they just asked, what part of DC do you feel more, or in the DMV, I guess, do you feel more comfortable and welcoming? If I'm not, I hope I'm paraphrasing that correct. And that question really means a lot to me because although I started my DC life uptown, I feel more welcome in Southeast. Why? Because I grew up in a shanty town in Dominican Republic where all you saw was neglected folks of colors, right? Whether you were Haitian, whether you were a Cocolo like myself, whether you were a woman. So I feel more welcome in the DC area in Southeast, and that is not because of the chaos that's going on, but because of the hope that I see. When we started the panel, I shared that the phrase that I identify the most with is "Soy el desarrollo en carne viva," and I feel like there's not enough celebration of what is occurring in this side of DC and the south side of DC with our youth, with our Black, Latino, and Afro-Latinos who are getting pushed down due to gentrification, how are we making sure that we're keeping them still on this side? Because they're gonna get pushed farther and farther down, but we have to make sure we tie them back. So I wanted to open that question to you ladies. What part of DC do you feel more comfortable in or celebrated in? You know, we navigate through different identities. We come from different intersections or in the DMV. So you guys go ahead, feel free to answer. You're muted, there you go.
I love that you just said that we navigate through different identities. And as an original Brooklynite, right? Like from Brooklyn, Southeast is love. Southeast feels like love, right? Like Southeast, and specifically within, you know, not that I am continuously in and out of the Southeast, because that's not true, but Southeast is my students. Oftentimes my students come all the way to Tacoma Park where I teach. And oftentimes the students that I see myself in the most are my students from Southeast. That's who I see myself in, right? And how they are navigating. So I think when I think of DC and I think of love, I think of Southeast. I do. It's hood. It's a lot of things. Well, excuse me. There are areas that are hood that remind me of Brooklyn, that remind me of East New York, that remind me of Bed-Stuy, that remind me of the things that I love about being from a city. And, you know, one of the things that I always say is, you know, because I am from Brooklyn, oftentimes we think that love don't live in the hood and we don't recognize the way that it looks. And I think that my students who come from Southeast remind me and they keep me grounded, right? Like it may not look the way that the world thinks that it needs to look, but there is something deeply beautiful about the way that my students from Southeast love me that is very different from my students who are from PG or from Montgomery County. It's different, right? Like my students from Southeast bring me packs of hair. Like, oh, Miss, when I had hair, I don't have it anymore. Oh, Miss Gibb, you like this blue hair? And they will bring it for me, and that's love, right? That is like, that means so much to me, right? So I think when I think of DC, Southeast is love. When I think of Maryland, you know, I'm currently, you know, child, should I say that on this one? Okay, well, I am currently in the Hyattsville area, Lord protect me. And, you know, I will say that it is heavily Central American. And in many respects, there are lots of, there is discomfort that I feel, but there's also something that is so special to me to be able to go to the international market and to be able to get my food, galletas chiquis, salsa lisano, rambutans that we call mamonchinos, which is highly problematic. But like my fruit, my food, the things that I need, even down to the colonia. I grew up wearing meneng, right? And so like when I go into the store to be able to get meneng, and like these are things that keep me very close to home. And so as much as it is not the easiest thing in the world to be in this area, I still don't know that I could leave because I can get access to the things that are home. And you know, and there, you know, and it's close to Silver Spring, so there are other Dominican spaces, little enclaves that I can find. And the place that, honestly speaking, in DC that was home and is no longer open, but shout out to her, was Esencias Panameñas. It was a restaurant in the, and Yadira, I think is her name, the Yadira. Oh my gosh, she used to make like this pardo, this fish, and then she would make chicheme, and these were things that like were very adjacent to my Afro-Costa Rican identity, right? So like I don't know if you chicheme is like how many,
Yeah.
like, right? So yeah. So and like she would make empanadas, but she would make empanadas de maíz, which is very different. And like, oh, Sanchez Panameñas that's where home was for me, and I miss it so much. Like, we can still get her catering, but that was honestly a spot that I knew that on a hard day I could go there and there would be a meal that was adjacent to what I knew. So when I think about that, I think about, you know, DC DMV is not one specific place that I feel comfortable, but there are several different intersecting places that my identity is fed, right? And also in this kind of Hyattsville area, about 20, 30 years ago, it was predominantly Jamaican. And so there are still remnants of that Jamaican culture. So there are still, the jerk spot ain't far, and when I need some jerk, I can get some. Or if I need some ackee and saltfish, I can get that. And these are, bacalao is a big thing for us. Like, that's salted codfish. If you don't know, you should find out. And these are just, I think that there are specific areas that I find home, right? And I cling to that because, if I don't, then there does feel like I will lose a part of me, if that makes sense. And I'm gonna drop the mic here, pass it to someone else.
I'll go next. I can just co-sign so much of what you said. When I first was moving up here, I had friends that lived up here. They made a whole lot of assumptions. I think, first of all, we're all women. So what I love about the DMV is that I see Black women prospering and they're bosses, boss women, business owners, startup entrepreneurs, women in tech. Sorry about that. That's probably my mom. Women in tech. So yeah, this is zooming from home, right? So, what I needed when I moved up here was being near a pupuseria and cars with loud exhaust pipes and the cars that go boom. That's Miami. That's Bluefields for me. And so people assumed that I wanted to live in Columbia or Townsend, like, the school systems there are better, they would tell me. And we need to be around diaspora. We need to be around community, my family, my spouse. And so for me, DC has changed so much. I used to intern here in 2004 and coming back to the Hyattsville area and seeing the changes, the tensions around those changes, gentrification, right. It presses me, it unsettles me. And at the same time, I see so much vibrance in people coming here, women who are on the move and Black women, Black Latino women, especially. So that excites me about DC. And I've been here only 3 years. The pandemic has been a beast. So I've been actually in community with people virtually. Where I work, the campus was shut down for a year and a half. So it's interesting how Manny and I were fast friends once we met, and we've never, I think, only once seen each other in person. That was the first time I met you. And I've never, with the exception of Fatima, who I had coffee with the other day because things are better. I think community can mean a lot of different things. And DC has so much to offer in the way of culture. So I actually am in love with the area that I live in. I also live right outside of Hyattsville, in the middle of the Salvadoran community, and just having my, pupusas and my gallo pinto and all of that. It's meaningful for me because I take home.
Where are you getting gallo pinto?
Yeah, gallo pinto right there. And hey, and if there's any Nicaraguans, Bluefielders here, we need a fritanga badly in the DMV.
But you still ain't answered my question though, sis. Where you getting this gallo pinto and why you didn't invite me?
Listen, you got to come over, first of all. And then second of all, there's a pupuseria right down the street. So that's community for me. And thank you for putting up with my phone.
I want to tell you how lucky, how fortunate you all are that there are stores. Because when we were coming up, there weren't. There was one store, Casa Peña at 17th and Penn, and 17th and R Street. And Casa Peña catered to all of the embassies, but there was no place else. Now, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, the Safeway on Columbia Road, which is still there today, they started having plátanos. And the funny story about they would throw away the black plátanos, los amarillos, and my mother, my mother would collect them. But before that, my mother would buy tons of them and just give them to our friends. But before that, there was just no stores. And then we started having stores. But my grandmother in Puerto Rico, my Puerto Rican grandmother, had several granddaughters, and no granddaughter was named after her. My middle name is Celita, which was named after her. My mother said, a woman with 10 sons and not having somebody named after her. She was trying to get a girl. She would send my mother cases of plátano, yuca, yautía, all of this stuff that my mother would then distribute to the Latin Americans here in Washington. Now, my favorite neighborhood is no longer my favorite. I was raised in Adams Morgan. We moved there when I was 4 years old. I loved it. I mean, there was nothing about Adams Morgan that I can say negative about. It was a great coming up. And now I live in Brooklyn. I've been in Brooklyn for 45 years. And it was a nice place to raise my kids. It was considered, yeah, she used to go off with a kid across the street. I never know where she was. It was considered the Catholic neighborhood because you have the monastery there, you have Catholic University, and, you know, the whole thing was Catholic, a lot of convents, a lot of rectories and all that stuff. And it's still a nice neighborhood. It's a residential neighborhood in the middle of the city. It is a neighborhood. But that too is being changed. I don't necessarily think always for the better, but it, like everything else, everything is changed. But Washington, DC, my new neighbor next door, her best friend was Howard with her, and she said, "You're Dominican?" And I said, "Yes." So my best friend is Dominican, and she lives in Qatar now. When she came a couple months ago, the lady next door invited us over, and I went with a whole plate of pastelitos. And I was like, "What are you taking it for?" So I can't go there con la mano vacía. And I said, "She hasn't had this in Qatar." Oh my gosh, we hugged and kissed as if we had known each other. And she is her age, but we had so much in common, so much. Different generation, just like you ladies here, different generation. But we've been to hell and back, and we have succeeded, you know, and I love who we are. I love what we bring to this country. I can't focus on the negative because that's a sign of sheer ignorance. You know, I think we are a beautiful people, and Washington, D.C. is the best place in the world. And I'm so glad that my parents came here and not anywhere else. I'll let someone else talk.
That's very beautiful, ladies. Thank you for sharing. Like I said, I feel my most welcome and comfortable. I've been in DC for 5 years, and I lived uptown, but I don't know. The reason why I feel so much closer to Southeast, because when I was listening to Angeley talking about the students, the babies, it's because I really see myself in the kids, you know, and despite people not hyping up this area as much, like, don't worry, we're going to color it the color of hope in the future, because sadly, my Black experience is so common to a lot of my students' Black experience, and that is being part of a community that gets neglected, right? I'm from a Caribbean country where everybody wants to go on vacation, but they don't talk about the shanty towns in the resorts. My students live in the capital of the world, really, but some of them don't even know what an embassy is. That's what I connect the most with. And to move a little bit towards like that, I wanted to ask you guys, who are you most influenced by? Who are you most influenced by and why? We could come off mute or we could share.
I'll go. My mom, and that is probably the most obvious one. She is now one of my ancestors, and I am deeply motivated by her and through her, and to continue the work that she has started. But I think the best way that I can say it is I love Black women, and Black women are my greatest inspirations, because, you know, in a piece I wrote a couple years ago, I said, ain't no place a Black girl gets to be safe except with each other. Ain't no place a Black woman get to be safe except with each other. And so anytime I go anywhere, I search out Black women, because oftentimes our narratives are the same because of being from marginalized communities and unfortunately experiencing what it is to be Black women under white supremacy. And so when I think about that, I often, at my job, on any of these panels, is to call the names of Black women in as many spaces, public spaces as possible, and specifically Afro Costa Rican women. And so that's my mother, Joyce Claire Gibbs Slowly. That is my aunt, Judith Gibbs Slowly. That is my godmother, Vilma Barter Connell. That is Patricia Gordon Watson. These are the women that have raised me, and I call their name in public spaces in as many ways, spaces, places, and times, because they will receive their roses in the land of the living. Point blank and period. Their names will be called wherever I am. That is their birthright. They deserve to be called. And then I think of Dr. Carmen Hutchinson from Limon, Costa Rica. I think of Dr. Natasha Gordon Chippenberry, who is from Brooklyn, New York, but originally Afro-Costa Rican descent and is now in Heredia and is working and doing this amazing work. And then specifically my contemporaries, Dash Harris, Evelyn Alvarez, right? These are just women. I call their names because we must give them their roses. And now Ana, and now Doña Carmen, and now Rosalyn. Like, we give them their roses and we honor them in the land of the living. Black women move me, point blank and period. I could die tomorrow and I would still want to come back a Black woman. I don't want to be anything else, because what type of blood is this in my veins that survives death and makes resurrection? What type of blood is this in my veins that makes hope out of nothing, that mashes plantains with a little butter and you have a meal and it sticks to your rib? What love is this that knows how to take coconut and turn it into oil, and coconut milk, and then turn it into a flan, and then turn it into rice and peas? What type of love is this that I come from that allows me to still breathe when everything is trying to take my oxygen? I love Black women, and they are my everything. And specifically, I'm going to take this quick moment and affirm you publicly, Doña Carmen. We stand on your shoulders, Doña Carmen. We stand on your shoulders, Doña Carmen. We stand on your shoulders, Doña Carmen. And we exist because you exist. And we name that publicly, that we exist because you exist. And there is no us without you, Doña Carmen. And we name you Doña with the highest respect, because te lo merece, you deserve it. Ashe.
Now, thank you so much. You have made me think of my own mother. My mother was Doña Juana. She was a hard pill to swallow, and I don't have her temperament. But I remember as a child, as I mentioned, I think before, aprende este maldito idioma para ayudarme. It was difficult for her because she came here as an adult.
Tell people what that means who don't know.
But there are speak.
But there are a whole bunch of other people.
Sorry. That means this.
Learn this damn language so you can help me. Learn this damn language so you me. That is what Doña Juana said.
Now, my mom,
Snaps.
my mom was sort of like a mess. She was very, very Catholic, very Catholic. When she came here, she found the need where she could fit to help people. She went to live with what she called an uncle, who was a priest. And my mother learned to be the next thing to a priest when she came to DC, because they didn't have a Spanish-speaking priest. When she put us at Sacred Heart, she would go to the church and nothing. She didn't understand anything except when they passed the plate. So I was in about third grade. She dictated a letter to me, to the pastor, demanding a Spanish-speaking priest. She said, "We are here and more of us are coming, and we need someone to speak our language." And because of her, we got El Padre Joaquin Martinez, who baptized, First Communion, confirmation, married and buried every Latino in the Washington tri-state area because of Juana Campos. In 1949, she started she started the novenas of La Alta Gracia, La Patrona Dominicana, the patroness of the Dominican Republic. And she went to 9 different houses. And at the end of the 9, they would have a novena after a Sunday Mass. That's still going on. And the first happened in 1950. And when all they could hear was the Latins that were in that church, all they can hear, today we celebrate the feast of Our Lady of Alta Gracia. That was the only word they understood. But it's still going strong today. The Salvadorians have taken over the church because those of us that were here earlier, I'm still in the city, but most of them moved down to the suburbs. But her faith, she found jobs for people. When my brother became, personal director of Marriott hotels in the area, and I had married a lawyer, she saw the sky open up. She would call my brother, I have 3 people here that need jobs for their husbands to get them into this country. You come today and bring the applications form. And she would call my husband and say, Ro, you bring your notary thing because I need for you to do. And then my husband would say, is this an order? And I'm going, yes, it is. She would have me go to the different places where they were abusing servants. People were abused. They thought they were still back in their countries. I remember a woman trying to threaten me, but I needed the woman to work for me because I had a newborn son. And this woman said to me, if you take her from here, I will call the police. I said, please do. I'll have you in your country in less than 48 hours because you're breaking the laws of the United States. My mother said, aprendan para que me ayuden. I mean, when I learned to drive, I was 16, and she had me going into places in the middle of the night to get somebody. And she said, my mother was an educated woman. She just didn't speak English. And she said, these people need help, and I won't let this country abuse them. You know, the poor girls from the country. This is the way, you know, how can we be so separate now when it didn't make any difference what color we were? It didn't make any difference. The only thing we knew was that this was a Latina. They didn't speak English. They didn't know the system, and my mother did. When she went to immigration, my mother never became an American citizen. She said, I gave you 2. So that's all you need. You don't need me. But when she would go, I remember one time we went to immigration and the woman said, she's not a citizen and she's been here so long. And I said, don't touch that. And then she called her supervisor. She's been here over 40 years and she's not a citizen. I said, don't touch that. You don't know this woman. Mira, she said everything but something Christian. What she had done in this country, what the country, she said, I can't give this country anything. I've given them my children. She says, I don't speak English that well. But that day, I swear, I don't know where her English came from. For others to come and say, we just came, no. Predominantly people of color, Black and brown, came to this country, in this city, in the 40s, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I see now all of these different communities talking about what someone has done for the community. It's been happening all along, all along. Okay.
And then we'll pass. Gracias, señora Carmen. Doña Carmen. Muchas gracias. Your mom's beautiful, Doña Carmen. She's beautiful. I miss my mom. I gotta go to the DR for my mom. Ana, your turn, my love.
I'm gonna make this very quick. My tears are near. I think Angeley took me there. So I have all the feels. My dad, I'm gonna, put the brothers on the spotlight, I guess, and just say my dad is my hero. He passed right after that picture with Francisco Campbell. And he, when he was sick, he never told us the story. He had a twin sister who died in a mudslide. And this is how I should have known that he was passing. But he started just recollecting and talking about things that were buried deep. So cut to the chase, he said that when they were living in Bonanza, Nicaragua, near the coal mines, it was actually exploitative and overmined, and there was a landslide that killed his sister. They gave his parents, my grandparents, $100 for their missing daughter who was never found. He remembered the name of the foreman. He remembered the name of the company, Neptune Company, coal mining company from Canada. And that company ended up getting $4 million from the Nicaraguan government to leave the country. So imagine they nationalized all of the country, companies, external companies, international companies, but they never compensated the people who were left very broken after, colonialism, imperialism. So that's how my dad lost his twin, and now he's joined her. But my dad was a quiet force. He was an accountant in Nicaragua, became a maintenance man here, and he held it down. He was just such a calm, peaceful person who was a steady presence in my life. So he's my hero.
That's very beautiful. Thank you for sharing. My dad's my hero too. My dad and my granddad and my mom and my grandma, may she rest in peace and continue to protect me. Because they're a representation of all of the sacrifices that is taken for me to come to America. And I am their desarrollo en carne viva because they are very much alive, except for my grandmother. But every time I pick up a phone or I'm down or something, they're like, wow, like you're doing so much. And Malcolm X, I've never found myself in literature, in English literature, until I read Malcolm X, and I felt assertive as a Black woman in America when I read his work. I'm going to pass it to Laura, but I want to thank our beautiful panelists because I'm very motivated and influenced by each of you ladies. And you too, Fatima, because I know you was helping, but I'll be by my mom like that all the time. So I want to thank you, and I'll hand it over to Laura.
I am so moved by what I've heard from all 5 of you this evening. And my job right now is to do housekeeping items, and I can just barely do it. I just really thank you for your stories, your voices, your courage, your power, your emotion, your heart, your intelligence. I am just absolutely blown away. Whew. Okay, so let me try to do this. So again, thank you. So the Carmen is Doña Carmen, I should say, is going to close for us. But again, thank you on behalf of absolutely everyone at the DC History Center. Thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your story. This program will be up on YouTube along with closed captioning in a few days, and I hope you share this with absolutely everybody you know. So I'm counting on everyone who's listening tonight to do that. If this is a community you would like to learn more about, we do have lots of great resources and readings for you, and so many wonderful poems tonight. And I hope we'll include that in some of our resources too. We're soon going to be sending you a survey, and we're eager to hear your thoughts about this program. And please let us know if you would like to participate in the community outreach program I mentioned earlier that Mariana is planning for the spring. And the survey tonight is available in English and Spanish. So behind the scenes, I am incredibly grateful for the work of my team. They're extraordinary. But I especially recognize tonight Marin Orchard, Anne McDonough, Sejal Swartz and Kimi Ramneen for her help on the new lip guide, which is fabulous. And thank you again to Manuel Mendez, who created this panel with us. Carmen Torruella-Quander, Ana Ndumu, Angeley Crawford Gibb, and Señorita Rosalyn Lake-Montero. And thank you also to your families, your mothers, your fathers, who you honored so beautifully tonight. Lastly, I want to thank the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities for their support of our programming this year. I hope we'll be doing a lot more like this. All right, so I will pass the mic over to Carmen to wrap up for us.
I want to leave you all. Before you know it, you'll be where I am sitting, 76 years old, having had a wonderful experience. I'm going to leave you with this one thought. Do not allow anyone to tell you who you are. You know who you are, you know where you come from, and you know more than those that don't. Always put your first step, always must be bien plantado, because you have people coming behind you and you have to lead and what is it like? Clear that path for those behind you. This is what my mother left me. We're very different, but she left me with always put what you are ahead and don't worry about anyone else. Do the best you can and not necessarily carry the burden or the sacrifice of what we are. Just be strong Black women.
That is so beautiful.
Ashe. Ashe.
Well, I want to thank everybody once more for joining us. Shout out to DC AfroLatino Caucus, DC History Center. Hopefully we get to do this once more. Un abrazo, amor y paz. Oh, tenemos a Mania.